The night vision footage flickered green and grainy, the way classified operations always looked when the Pentagon finally declassified them decades later. But this wasn't decades later. This was 10 years. And some things were still redacted. May 2nd, 2011, Abbottabad, Pakistan, the compound. Everyone knew about Neptune's spear. The world knew that name. Osama bin Laden, SEAL Team 6, justice delivered in the dead of night. But what the world didn't know, what remained buried in folders marked eyes only, was that Neptune spear had a shadow element, a support package, a contingency team positioned 300 meters north, tasked with securing a secondary objective the CIA deemed equally critical. The footage showed it all through the cold mechanical lens of helmet-mounted cameras. Shadows moving fast through narrow corridors, muzzle flashes blooming white and infrared. Voices crackling over encrypted comms, clipped and professional, the way warriors spoke when death was 3 feet away and hesitation meant failure. One voice cut through clearer than the others. Female, calm, surgical. Reaper actual package 2 located, 3 tangos in room, engaging. The camera jerked, the sound of suppressed gunfire, that distinctive thwip, thwip, thwip of subsonic rounds through a titanium suppressor. 3 muzzle flashes, 3 bodies dropping. Then silence, then movement. Hands zip-tying a high-value target, face pixelated in the footage, but body language screaming terror. Package 2 secured, 3 brig enemy KIA, 0 friendly casualties, moving to extract. The voice didn't celebrate, didn't boast, just reported, just moved. Because that's what professionals did. They executed, they survived, they brought everyone home. The camera panned briefly as the team exfiltrated. For just 2 seconds, the lens caught a reflection in a shattered mirror. A figure in full kit night vision goggles, flipped up, face paint smeared with sweat. Young, maybe late 20s. Female features unmistakable, even under the war paint and exhaustion. Lieutenant Alexandra Thorne, 28 years old. First woman ever to serve in SEAL Tier 1 direct action capacity. A fact that would remain classified for another 7 years until the combat exclusion policy officially ended and the Pentagon could finally admit what had already been happening in the shadows. The footage cut to black. Text appeared on screen, cold and bureaucratic. Classified. Special access required, Operation Neptune Spear. Support element Echo, May 2nd, 2011. Abbottabad, Pakistan. Then another line smaller, almost easy to miss. 10 years later. Naval Special Warfare Center, Coronado, California. Present day. The sun rose over the Pacific like it always did, indifferent to the warriors who trained in its shadow. The base stirred early. SEALs didn't believe in sleeping in. They believed in pain and pushing and proving. Every day, every hour, every breath. Building 12 housed the advanced training program. Elite candidates, men who'd already survived BAU-DS, already earned the Trident, already proven they could endure what broke most humans. But earning the Trident was just the beginning. Assignment to a SEAL team, especially the ones that operated in the shadows, required more. Required evaluation. Required someone to look at 24 highly trained killers and decide which ones had what it took to go even darker. The candidates gathered in the briefing room at 0530, 24 men, just ranging from 23 to 31. Some fresh from the teams, others rotating back from deployment. All of them hungry, all of them convinced they were the best. They wore PT gear, black shorts and brown t-shirts with Navy stenciled across the chest. Muscles earned through suffering. Scars earned through violence. Confidence earned through survival. They sat in folding chairs arranged in neat rows the way the military arranged everything, and they waited. The rumor mill had been grinding all week. A distinguished evaluation officer was coming. Someone important. Speculation ran wild. Maybe a DevGru commander. Maybe someone from JSOC. Maybe a Delta operator cross-training. The candidates traded theories in low voices, that particular blend of respect and bravado that defined young warriors who'd already done things most people couldn't imagine. At 0545, the door opened. She walked in without announcement, without fanfare, without anything to indicate she was anything other than someone who'd taken a wrong turn. She wore a Navy working uniform Type 3, the blue-gray camouflage pattern designed for base duty, but the uniform looked worn, faded, like it had seen years of use and hadn't been replaced. No name tape visible, no rank insignia on the collar where it should be. Just a chest rig with a few patches and pins that were hard to make out from a distance. Her boots were Merrill tactical hikers, broken in and scuffed the kind you wore when you'd walked 1,000 miles in worse conditions. She carried a simple black backpack, the kind you could buy at any surplus store for 40 bucks. She was 38 years old, though she looked both older and younger depending on the light. Her face was sun-weathered lines around her eyes that came from squinting in deserts and mountains. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun regulation, but unremarkable. She stood 5'7", maybe 140, fully geared. She moved with economy, no wasted motion, the way people moved when they'd learned that every calorie mattered, and exhaustion was always 3 steps behind you. She didn't make eye contact with anyone. Just walked to the back of the room, set her backpack against the wall, and stood there. Observing, silent, patient. The reaction was immediate. Confusion first, then amusement. Lieutenant Garrett Blackwood, 26 years old, two-time NCAA wrestling champion from Tennessee, built like a fire hydrant with a neck thicker than most people's thighs, leaned over to his buddy and stage whispered loud enough for half the room to hear. "Who let the base librarian in here?" Snickers rippled through the rows. Not cruel exactly, just that casual dismissiveness that young men specialized in when they thought they'd figured out the world. Another voice chimed in, Lieutenant Finn Sullivan from Boston, a combat medic with an Irish temper and a skeptical worldview, shaped by too many politicians making promises about the military that never materialized. $10 says she's some Pentagon diversity consultant. They were going to lecture us about sensitivity training. More laughter, quieter this time, because even warriors who joked knew the walls had ears and careers could end over the wrong comment at the wrong time. Lieutenant Wade Hollister, 27 intel specialist from Montana, didn't say anything, but his eyes tracked her with the cold assessment of someone who'd spent years evaluating threats and dismissing non-threats. His conclusion was obvious from his expression. Non-threat, administrative, irrelevant. The woman didn't react, didn't even seem to notice. She just stood there, back against the wall, hands loose at her sides, eyes moving across the room in a slow, methodical scan. If you watched closely, really closely, you could see her eyes pausing on each face. Half a second per man, cataloging, recording, filing away. The way snipers observe terrain before a shot. The way operators memorize room layouts before a breach. The way predators studied prey. But nobody was watching that closely. They'd already dismissed her, already moved on, already returned to their conversations about who the real evaluator would be and when he'd arrive. 0600 clicked over on the wall clock. The door opened again. This time everyone noticed. Master Chief Special Warfare Operator Thomas Briggs filled the doorway the way senior enlisted always did, with the kind of physical presence that had nothing to do with size and everything to do with 42 years of accumulated authority. He was 64 years old, mandatory retirement looming in 6 months, his face a roadmap of everywhere the Navy had sent him and everything those places had cost. Gulf War 1991, Kuwait and Iraq. He'd been 24 then, a new SEAL, learning that war was nothing like the movies. Somalia, 1993. Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down. He'd been on the ground for that nightmare, seen Rangers and Delta operators die in streets that smelled like diesel and blood. Afghanistan, 2001 through 2003. Tora Bora. Hunting bin Laden through mountains where the air was so thin you couldn't catch your breath, and the cold tried to kill you as effectively as the Taliban. Iraq again, 2006 through 2008. Ramadi, the Sunni Triangle, urban warfare that made Mogadishu look organized. 42 years, 4 wars, thousands of missions, too many funerals. The ribbons on his chest told the story in colorful rows. Silver Star, Bronze Stars with Vita devices, Purple Hearts, campaign medals from conflicts most of these young operators barely remembered. He stepped into the room and every candidate went silent. That wasn't protocol. That was instinct. When a man like Thomas Briggs walked in, you shut up and paid attention because men like him had forgotten more about warfare than you'd ever learn. His eyes swept the room once. Then they found her. The woman in the worn uniform, standing in the back, still silent, still observing. Master Chief Thomas Briggs, 64 years old, 42 years of service, veteran of 4 wars, and more classified operations than existed in official records, came to attention. Full attention, spine straight, shoulders back, heels together, hand rising in a salute so sharp it could cut. The candidates froze. Confusion crashed through the room like a flashbang grenade. Then Briggs's voice, that command voice forged in 4 decades of leading men into places where leadership meant the difference between survival and body bags, filled every corner of the room. Attention on deck. 24 chairs scraped. 24 bodies snapped upright. 24 pairs of boots cracked together. Because when a Master Chief said attention, you didn't think. You didn't hesitate. You moved. But the confusion remained, painted on every face. Because attention on deck meant officer present, commissioned officer, someone with rank, someone with authority. And the only person in the room besides them and the Master Chief was the woman in the back, the one with the worn uniform, the one they'd mocked 3 minutes ago. Briggs held his salute, didn't drop it, didn't waver. The woman nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and only then did Briggs's hand fall back to his side. He turned to face the candidates. His voice dropped from command bark to something quieter, but no less intense. Gentlemen, meet Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Thorne. The name meant nothing to them, not yet. Call sign Reaper. Garrett Blackwood's face went white then red. The wrestler, the loudmouth, the one who'd made the librarian comment. His jaw clenched so hard you could see the muscles jump. Briggs continued his tone flat factual, reciting her record, the way you'd read a after-action report, because that's all this was. Facts. Indisputable. Written in blood and confirmed by witnesses who couldn't lie because most of them were dead. Navy Cross for actions under enemy fire. 2 Silver Stars with Combat V device. Bronze Star with Valor. Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. Each award landed like a hammer blow. Navy Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor, given for extraordinary heroism in combat. The kind of heroism where you did something so far beyond the call of duty that senior officers sat in rooms and debated whether you deserved the medal itself. Silver Stars, 2 of them, with Combat V meaning Valor, meaning she didn't just serve in combat, she distinguished herself in combat, went above and beyond while people were actively trying to kill her. Purple Heart with oak leaf clusters, wounded in action. More than once, the candidates weren't laughing anymore. Briggs paused. Let the silence build. Let the weight settle. Then he walked across the room, slow, deliberate, until he stood next to Alexandra Thorne. Stood beside her. Not in front. Beside. Showing solidarity. Showing respect. And the pause stretched. 2 seconds. 3. Theater. But earned theater. Because what came next deserved the buildup. The silver trident distinguished combat pin. His voice dropped it even lower on those words, almost reverent, because that pin, that small piece of metal most people had never heard of, meant something that transcended rank and time, and even the wars themselves. Briggs reached out and tapped the pin on Alexandra's chest, right there above her other ribbons. Small, silver. Easy to miss if you didn't know what you were looking for. A trident, the seal symbol, but wrapped in a laurel wreath that signified combat, specific combat, the kind that happened in the darkest places where the nation sent its most capable warriors to do things that could never be acknowledged. Only 5 living operators in the entire SEAL community possessed this pin. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. 5. Out of every SEAL who ever served, whoever earned the trident, whoever walked into hell and came back, only 5 living operators have been awarded the Silver Trident Distinguished Combat Pin. It's given for completing level black classified missions. Missions so sensitive their existence will never be confirmed. Missions where failure meant catastrophe and success meant silence missions, where you brought your entire team home with 0 losses despite odds that should have killed everyone. Briggs's hand dropped. His eyes swept the candidates. Some were still processing. Some were beginning to understand. Garrett Blackwood looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Commander Thorne has completed 7 such operations. 7. Across 2 theaters. She holds more confirmed combat hours than any operator in this room, including me. That last part landed hardest, because Master Chief Thomas Briggs had 42 years, 4 wars, more missions than most people had birthdays. And he was standing there at attention, telling them that this woman, this quiet woman in the worn uniform, had seen more combat done, more survived, more than him. Alexandra Thorne spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, not weak, not tentative, just quiet. The kind of quiet that made you lean in to hear, made you focus, made you understand that volume had nothing to do with authority. A SEAL doesn't survive on ego. She paused, let the words settle. You survive when nature is trying to kill you, when exhaustion is trying to kill you, when enemies are trying to kill you, when fate itself seems designed to erase you from existence. Another pause. Her eyes moved across their faces, not challenging, not judging, just seeing. You survive by being smarter, quieter, and more prepared than death itself. The room held its breath. Garrett Blackwood, to his credit, despite the humiliation burning in his chest, despite the urge to stay silent and hope everyone forgot his comment, raised his hand. Because he'd been raised to own his mistakes, and this was a mistake. A big one. Ma'am. His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. Tried again. Ma'am, with all respect, what qualifies you to evaluate Tier 1 candidates? It was a fair question, asked respectfully now, but still carrying that underlying current of doubt, that need to understand, to verify, to confirm that this was real and not some social experiment or political stunt. Briggs turned to Garrett. His face was stone. His voice was ice. She was Assault Element Lead on Neptune Spear's support package. Abbottabad, May 2nd, 2011. Her classified role secured a secondary objective that prevented a follow-on terrorist attack the CIA assessed would have killed 50 American civilians. When the primary assault team's helicopter crashed and contingencies activated, Commander Thorne's element, Purvio, provided security and extraction support that allowed the mission to succeed. He leaned forward slightly, not threatening, just emphasizing. That enough qualification, Lieutenant? Garrett Blackwood's face went through several colors. He nodded once. Couldn't speak. Finn Sullivan, the medic, raised his hand next. His voice was steadier. He'd processed faster. He asked what half the room was thinking. Ma'am, what do you need from us? Alexandra looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, the faintest trace of approval crossed her features. Over the next 18 hours, you'll complete 8 combat evaluation protocols. Each one is designed based on real-world operations where SEAL teams failed, where operators died, where missions collapsed despite superior training and equipment. She gestured to the door behind them that led to the training grounds. Some of you will not pass. That's not a threat. That's a statistical reality. These evaluations are designed to expose weaknesses that get people killed in the field. Better to find them here in training than overseas in a firefight. She walked slowly toward the front of the room, not aggressive, just moving, claiming space. I determine who advances. Master Chief Briggs will observe and provide secondary assessment, but the final decision is mine. Wade Hollister, the intel specialist, spoke without raising his hand. Direct question, respectful but pointed. What are we being evaluated for, ma'am? Standard team assignment or something else? Alexandra stopped, looked at Briggs. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then she looked back at Wade. That information is classified. Complete the evaluations first. Then you'll be briefed. She turned toward the door. First evolution, the obstacle course, standard SEAL combat conditioning qualification, full kit. Timed, recorded, gear up, outside, 5 minutes. She walked out without waiting for acknowledgement, because she didn't need acknowledgement. The order was given. They would follow. That's how this worked. Briggs watched her go, then turned to the candidates. Move. They moved. The obstacle course sat 300 yards from the barracks, baked under the California sun even this early in the morning. SEALs had been running this course for decades. It wasn't complicated. It was just hard. 200-meter sprint, 40-foot rope wall, 50 meters of barbed wire crawl, 150-pound casualty dummy carry, 200-meter sprint back to start. Simple, brutal, designed to test everything that mattered. Speed, strength, endurance, technique, mental toughness when your body was screaming at you to stop. The candidates lined up in PT gear, black shorts and brown shirts soaked with sweat before they even started. A few stretched. Most didn't bother. Stretching was for people who weren't already warmed up from running 5 miles before breakfast. Alexandra stood at the start line. She'd shed the worn NWU top. Underneath, she wore a brown navy PT shirt, same as the candidates, and black compression shorts. Her build was visible now. Lean, not bodybuilder lean, functional lean. Muscles carved from necessity, not aesthetics. Scars visible on her arms and legs, the kind you got from shrapnel and barbed wire and things that wanted to tear flesh. She carried no gear except a stopwatch and a clipboard. Official, detached, clinical. Garrett Blackwood, still burning with shame from earlier, stepped forward first. Volunteered. Because the best way to erase mockery was to dominate, to prove, to show everyone he belonged here despite the ignorant comment he'd made. "I'll run first, ma'am." Alexandra looked at him, really looked at him, took in his size, his build, his energy, the wrestler's compact power, the swagger barely contained, the need to prove. "Go," Garrett exploded off the line. He was fast, legitimately fast, 200 pounds moving like a running back. He hit the rope wall, jumped, grabbed high, muscled his way up using brute strength instead of technique. But it worked because he had the strength to make it work. Threw himself over the top, dropped, absorbed the impact, kept moving. Barbed wire. He dove flat, started crawling. Proper seal crawl, staying low, using elbows and knees, not raising his body, but even though every instinct screamed to get off the ground. Sweat poured. Breathing hard now, but he pushed. The dummy. 150 pounds of dead weight, designed to simulate carrying a wounded teammate. Garrett grabbed it, deadlifted. It got it across his shoulders in a fireman's carry. Started running, not sprinting anymore. Couldn't sprint with that weight. But moving, determined, refusing to quit. Final sprint, legs burning, lungs screaming, vision starting to tunnel. But he'd been here before. Pain was familiar. Pain was just information. He crossed the finish line. Time 7 minutes 38 seconds. Solid, above average. He bent over, hands on knees, gasping, but couldn't hide the satisfied grin. That was a good run. He knew it. Everyone watching knew it. Finn Sullivan went next. 6 minutes 52 seconds. More technical on the rope. Smoother on the crawl. Medic's endurance showing. Wade Hollister, 7 minutes 11 seconds. Efficient, no wasted energy. 3 more candidates. Times ranging from 6:40 to 7:50, all passing, all respectable. Then Alexandra picked up the clipboard, made a note, and handed it to Briggs. "I'll demonstrate baseline standard." She walked to the start line. No warm-up, no preparation, no stretching or psyching herself up. Just stood there, waiting. Briggs raised his hand. "Go." She ran, not a sprint, not yet. Controlled pace, steady. Breathing rhythmic, the kind of controlled breathing you learned when oxygen was scarce and every breath had to count. Marathoner's pace. But this wasn't a marathon. The rope wall loomed, 40 feet of vertical challenge. Most candidates jumped, caught, low climbed, using arm strength and determination. Alexandra jumped, but she jumped higher than physics should allow for someone her size. Caught the rope 8 feet up, and then she didn't climb. She flowed. Hand over hand, legs wrapped, body angled, using technique that turned climbing into something fluid. 9 seconds, top to bottom. She cleared the wall in 9 seconds. The candidates watching went quiet. Barbed wire, she didn't hesitate. Dropped flat and moved. Not crawling, slithering. Like water finding the path of least resistance. Perfect seal tactical crawl, the kind you learned when you'd done it under fire and mud and darkness, when getting it wrong meant getting shot. The dummy, 150 pounds. Same weight everyone else carried. Alexandra approached it, got low, used leverage, fireman's carry. But the technique was different, perfect balance point. Weight distributed across shoulders and hips, not just raw strength. She stood and started moving. Not running, but not slowing. Sustainable pace, efficient pace, the pace you used when you had 5 miles to go and couldn't afford to gas out in mile 1. Final sprint. And now she accelerated, only now because she'd conserved, because she understood energy management. The sprint was brutal, full commitment, legs driving, arms pumping. She crossed the finish line. Briggs clicked the stopwatch. 6 minutes, 4 seconds. The candidates stared. 6:04, second fastest time in the base's official records. And she wasn't breathing hard, wasn't bent over, wasn't gasping. Elevated breathing, yes. Sweating, yes. But controlled. In control. Garrett Blackwood watched her. The mockery had died hours ago. Now there was just recognition. She was better. Not just good, better. Faster. More technical. More efficient. Briggs walked over to the candidates while Alexandra took a knee sipping from a water bottle face neutral. Gentlemen, in 2013, Commander Thorne ran this exact course in full combat kit. 80 pounds of gear, body armor, ammunition, weapons, medical supplies, radio equipment, under simulated mortar fire, smoke grenades, instructors shooting blanks overhead. He paused. Let that sink in. She completed it in 8 minutes, 12 seconds. What you just watched was her warm-up. Finn Sullivan, the medic, asked the question everyone was thinking. Master Chief, how do we get that good? Briggs looked at him, then looked at Alexandra, who'd stood, was walking back toward them. You don't. Not overnight. She's been doing this for 15 years. She's run this course hundreds of times, in heat, in cold, injured, exhausted, after 48 hours without sleep, until it's not about strength anymore. It's about muscle memory, about efficiency, about refusing to quit even when your body is shutting down. Alexandra reached them, looked at the candidates, all of them watching her now with different eyes, respect replacing doubt. But something else too, that predator recognition, that understanding that they were in the presence of someone who operated on a different level. Evolution 1 complete, she said quietly. 15-minute break. Hydrate. Then close quarters, combat evaluation. She walked past them toward the training building. No celebration, no acknowledgement of what she'd just done. Because to her, it wasn't impressive. It was just baseline. The standard. What was expected. Garrett Blackwood watched her go, then turned to Finn Sullivan. We fucked up, he said quietly. We really fucked up. Finn nodded. Yeah, but at least we're learning. Wade Hollister stood apart from them, arms crossed, face thoughtful, because his brain was already working the problem, already analyzing data, already reaching conclusions that made him uncomfortable. They hadn't been brought here for standard evaluation. Commander Alexandra Thornholder of the Silver Trident, distinguished combat pin veteran of operations that would never be acknowledged, didn't show up to watch candidates run an obstacle course. Something else was happening, something bigger, something that required operators who could not only perform under pressure, but who could learn, adapt, and maybe most importantly, who could check their egos long enough to follow someone who'd actually done what they only dreamed about. The classified folder on Briggs's desk, the cryptic reference to additional briefing after evaluation. The way Alexandra moved spoke assessed. This wasn't about joining a SEAL team. This was recruitment for something else, something darker. Something that required the kind of operator who could stand in a room full of warriors, get mocked, and not react. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't need to. Because she'd already proven everything she needed to prove to the only people who mattered. The ones who knew, the ones who'd been there, the ones who understood that the loudest warriors were rarely the most dangerous. Wade Hollister smiled slightly, made a mental note, started watching everything differently. Because if this was recruitment, he wanted in, whatever in meant. The sun climbed higher over Coronado. The Pacific crashed against the shore in its endless rhythm, and 24 candidates began to understand that everything they thought they knew about being a SEAL was about to get tested by someone who'd already passed tests they couldn't imagine. The evaluations were just beginning, and Alexandra Thorne's silent, efficient, carrying weights no one could see was just getting started. The combat training room smelled like sweat and rubber mats and decades of violence practiced until it became art. Heavy bags hung from chains in the corners. Focus mitts stacked on shelves. The floor was covered in interlocking foam tiles, blue and red, stained dark in places where blood had seeped through over years of training that sometimes got too realistic. A fighting ring occupied the center, 20 feet by 20 feet, White tape marking boundaries that existed more as suggestions than rules because real combat didn't have boundaries. You fought where the enemy found you, in hallways, in rooms, in dirt, in mud, in places where there was no ref to call timeout. The candidates filed in. 15-minute break had turned into 10 because nobody wanted to look weak, wanted to look like they needed recovery time. They'd hydrated, changed shirts, taped hands, prepared for whatever came next. Alexandra stood at the edge of the ring. She'd changed too. Same brown PT shirt, but fresh. Black compression shorts. Bare feet. Her hands were already taped professional wraps that spoke of thousands of hours doing this exact thing. Briggs stood nearby, arms crossed, face unreadable. Observing, always observing, Alexandra gestured to the ring. Close quarters combat evaluation. Hand to hand. Submission or three-point contact. Standard SEAL rules. No strikes to eyes, throat, or spine. Controlled aggression. You're not trying to kill. You're demonstrating technical proficiency under stress. She paused. Let them absorb that. Anyone want to volunteer? The room stayed silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then Garrett Blackwood stepped forward. Because of course he did. Because humiliation was a fuel, and he'd been burning on it since the moment Briggs revealed who Alexandra was. Because wrestlers didn't back down from grappling challenges. It was genetic, cellular. I'll go, ma'am. Alexandra nodded once, gestured to the ring. Step in. They entered from opposite sides. Garrett rolled his shoulders, bounced on his toes, that nervous energy that fighters carried the need to move to stay loose, to not let tension lock muscles. Alexandra stood still, centered, balanced, weight evenly distributed, hands loose at her sides, not up in a guard position. Open, almost vulnerable. Briggs's voice cut through the silence. Standard rules apply. Tap means stop. Commander Thorne has final authority to call the match if she assesses injury risk. Begin on my mark. He raised his hand. The room held its breath. Begin. Garrett moved immediately, not reckless, but aggressive. Double-leg takedown the wrestler's bread and butter change levels and drive through your opponent. He was fast, explosive, textbook execution. Alexandra's hips shifted, 6 inches. That's all. 6 inches backward, just enough that Garrett's hands caught air instead of legs. His momentum carried him forward, off balance. And her hands were suddenly on his shoulders, redirecting, adding force to movement that was already wrong. He stumbled, caught himself, reset. She hadn't even moved her feet. He came again. Different approach. Tried to close distance, get his hands on her established grips. Wrestling was about grips, about controlling the other person's body, about making them move where you wanted. He got one hand on her wrist, thought he had control. Then her wrist rotated some technique that shouldn't work, shouldn't break his grip, but did. His hand was empty. Her other hand tapped his elbow, pushed. Not hard, just precise. His arm straightened, balance shifted. He had to step to stay upright. The candidates watching began to understand. She wasn't fighting, she was redirecting. Using his force, his momentum, his aggression against him. Aikido principles, systema flow, things that looked mystical but were just physics applied by someone who'd done them 10,000 times. Garrett tried again, more aggressive now, frustration creeping in. He shot for a single-leg takedown, committed fully because half measures didn't work against skilled opponents. This time, Alexandra didn't move back. She moved forward, into the shot. Her hips dropped, her arm wrapped around his head. Sprawl defense, but not just defense. Her weight drove down, her legs spread, and suddenly Garrett was face down on the mat, Alexandra's weight on his back, one arm trapped the other, being pulled into a position that made his shoulder scream. 4 seconds. Start to submission position. 4 seconds. She held it, not cranking the lock, not injuring, just holding, letting him feel it, letting him understand how completely he'd been controlled. Then she released, extended her hand, helped him up. Garrett's face was red, not from exertion, from something else. But he took her hand, stood, nodded. Again, he said, voice tight. Alexandra looked at him, really looked. Saw the pride wounded, the ego demanding redemption, the young warrior who couldn't accept that he'd been beaten so easily. If you want, they reset. Briggs watched, didn't intervene, because this was part of the evaluation too. How you handled failure, how you responded to being dominated, whether you learned or whether you just got angry. Garrett came at her again, more technical this time, setting up combinations, feints, level changes, everything his coaches had taught him, everything that had made him a champion at the NCAA level. Alexandra defended everything. Minimal movement, maximum efficiency. She looked like she was barely trying, and that made it worse, because it was obvious she wasn't at her limit, wasn't even close. She was operating at about 30%, and that was enough. He finally got his hands on her. Locked up in a clinch. Thought he had her. Wrestlers love the clinch, close quarters, strength against strength, and he outweighed her by 60 pounds. Basic physics said he should be able to control this. Her knee came up. Not hard, not a real strike, just touched his thigh. Threat. Then her hips shifted, weight moved, and somehow he was spinning his own grip used against him, and his back hit the mat hard enough to knock air from his lungs. She was on him instantly. Mounted position, knees pinning his arms, hand at his throat, not choking, just resting there. Demonstration. In Ramadi 2014, I subdued an insurgent fighter using this exact sequence. He was 240, on stimulants, fighting for his life. I didn't give him the option to tap. Her voice was quiet, matter of fact, not boasting, just stating reality. Choose wisely, Lieutenant. She lifted her hand from his throat. Garrett tapped the mat twice. Submission, acceptance. This time when she helped him up, his face was different. The humiliation was still there, but something else too. Understanding, maybe respect. The beginning of it anyway. Briggs spoke from outside the ring. Emotion in combat is a death sentence. She just demonstrated tactical restraint twice. Didn't injure. Didn't humiliate more than necessary. Just controlled. That's the difference between a fighter and a warrior. Warriors understand when not to break something. Finn Sullivan stepped forward. The medic. Smart enough to have watched both exchanges and learned from them. Ma'am, can you teach us those transitions? We need to learn that. Alexandra looked at him, and for the first time since she'd walked into the briefing room that morning, she smiled. Small, barely visible, but genuine. Now you're thinking like Tier 1 operators. She spent the next 15 minutes teaching, breaking down the techniques, explaining leverage points, weight distribution, how to use an opponent's momentum. The candidates practiced on each other. Garrett included his ego damaged but not destroyed his brain, overriding his pride, because he was smart enough to know that learning from someone better was how you got better yourself. Alexandra moved through the pairs, correcting grips, adjusting angles, demonstrating on volunteers who discovered that understanding something intellectually and having it done to you were completely different experiences. Briggs watched, made notes on his clipboard, but mostly he watched Alexandra. The way she taught, patient, clear, not degrading, not mocking, just sharing knowledge accumulated through years of violence that these candidates had only just begun to experience. When the time was up, she called them back to the center. Evolution 2 complete. Next is tactical planning. Follow me. She led them to a briefing room 3 doors down. The room was cooler, air-conditioned, dominated by a large table covered with maps and satellite photos. Military topographical maps with elevation lines and grid coordinates. Overhead imagery from drones or satellites, resolution high enough to pick out individual buildings and vehicles. The maps showed urban terrain, Middle Eastern architecture, flat roofs, narrow alleys, the kind of environment where American forces had learned hard lessons about asymmetric warfare. Alexandra stood at the head of the table. Briggs took position near the door. The candidates gathered around, still sweating from the combat training, but focused now. Because this was different. This was strategy. And strategy was where battles were won or lost before the first shot was fired. Scenario, Alexandra said. Hostage rescue. 2 American contractors held in this compound. She pointed to a building cluster in the center of the map. Enemy force estimated at 20 to 30 fighters. Urban terrain, civilian population present. Your mission is to plan an infiltration and extraction that minimizes exposure, prevents civilian casualties, and gets our people out alive. She stepped back, crossed her arms. You have 10 minutes. Designate a team lead. Brief me on your approach. The candidates looked at each other. That moment of social calculus that happened in groups figuring out who would step up, who wanted to lead, who was willing to take responsibility if the plan failed. Wade Hollister, the intel specialist from Montana, nodded to himself and moved to the table. Quiet authority. The others deferred. He started tracing routes with his finger, talking through his logic. Direct approach. Insert here on the north side during early morning hours, low activity period. Speed-based infiltration. Breach the compound. Locate and extract hostages. Exfil through this alley system to the pickup point. He looked up at Alexandra, confident, waiting for approval. She walked to the table, studied his plan for 30 seconds, then picked up a red marker and started marking the map. 3 enemy overwatch positions you didn't account for. Here, here, and here. Red X's appeared on the map. They have sight lines covering your infiltration route. You'd be compromised before you reach the compound. She marked 2 more locations. Choke points, single entry, no fallback. If the enemy blocks this alley, your entire team is trapped. Mosul 2016, a SEAL element used this exact approach in similar terrain. 2 KIA, 4 WIA. Mission failure. Wade's confident expression faltered. He looked at the map again, saw what she was saying. The plan that had seemed solid 60 seconds ago now looked like suicide. Alexandra took a different colored marker, started sketching her own approach. The candidates leaned in watching. Unconventional infiltration through the market district, blend with civilian traffic, move during high activity hours, not low. Counterintuitive but effective. Enemies expect attacks during quiet periods. They don't expect you to walk through a crowded market. She drew multiple routes. 3 primary paths, 4 fallback positions. If any route is compromised, you shift. You don't commit to a single approach. Flexibility is survival. She tapped a building adjacent to the target compound. Establish overwatch here. Aerial distraction here, time to draw attention away from your infiltration. Multiple contingencies for exfil. Because the plan that gets you in almost never works for getting you out. She set down the marker, looked at Wade, not with judgment, not with condescension, just with the tired knowledge of someone who'd learned these lessons when mistakes cost lives. I learned this planning support elements for Neptune Spear, the raid on bin Laden's compound. Everyone knows about the helicopters, the assault team, the 38 minutes inside. What they don't know is that we planned for 17 different failure scenarios. 1 helicopter did crash, but we had contingencies. That's why everyone came home. The room went absolutely silent, because Neptune Spear was legend, was history, was the operation that every SEAL knew, studied, analyzed. And she'd been there, had helped plan it, had executed support elements that allowed the primary assault to succeed even when things went wrong. Briggs spoke from his position by the door. Perfect plans get people killed. Flexible plans save lives. Commander Thorne understands the difference because she's been the one making decisions when lives were at stake and there was no time to consult a manual. Alexandra pulled up satellite imagery on a screen mounted to the wall. 2011 photography of Abbottabad, the compound. She pointed to various features explaining sightlines, approaches, contingency positions. Not bragging, just teaching. Sharing operational knowledge that existed nowhere in official manuals because it was learned through necessity and blood. The candidates absorbed every word, took mental notes, asked questions. Good questions. Tactical questions that showed they were thinking, processing, moving beyond textbook doctrine to understand the messy reality of operations where the enemy got a vote and Murphy's Law was always in effect. After 20 minutes, Alexandra shut down the screen. Evolution 3 complete. Next is advanced marksmanship. Follow Master Chief Briggs. I'll meet you there. The candidates filed out. Garrett held back slightly, approached Alexandra as she was gathering the maps. Ma'am, that adjustment you showed me in the ring, the hip movement, can you show me again later? She looked at him, saw the pride swallowed the ego, checked the willingness to learn. After evening chow, gym stays open until 2200. Bring anyone who wants to practice. He nodded. Something passed between them. Not friendship, not yet, but mutual respect. The foundation of it. The shoot house was climate-controlled and smelled like gun oil and expended powder. Modern facility designed to simulate urban combat environments. Configurable walls, multiple rooms, live fire capable with proper backstops and ventilation. Today's setup was hostage rescue scenario. 4 rooms, simulated hostages marked with bright orange vests, targets marked with standard silhouettes, simunition loaded in M4 carbines, the kind that hurt like hell, if you got hit but wouldn't kill you. Not easily anyway. Alexandra stood at the entrance, rifle in hand. M4A1 with aim point T2 optic, surefire suppressor, tactical light. Professional setup. The rifle looked like an extension of her body, held with the casual comfort that came from thousands of hours carrying similar weapons in places where dropping it meant death. Close quarters battle, speed and precision. Clear 4 rooms. Eliminate threats. Don't hit hostages. You're timed. Standard is sub 45 seconds with 0 hostage casualties. Finn Sullivan volunteered first. He was good, smooth. Medical training gave him steady hands, awareness of angles and lines of fire. He cleared the course in 48 seconds. 1 hostage grazed, minor point deduction, but overall solid performance. 2 more candidates ran, times ranging from 50 to 60 seconds. All competent, all professional. Alexandra handed her rifle to Briggs, checked the chamber, confirmed loaded. Step to the start line. I'll demonstrate Tier 1 standard. Briggs started the timer. She moved. Not rushing, but not slow either. Flowing. Each room entry was textbook. Slicing the pie, clearing angles, muzzle, always pointed where eyes were looking. But it was the speed of decision that separated her from the others. Target identified, threat assessed, trigger pulled. No hesitation, no second guessing. First room, 2 targets. Both center mass, moving. Second room, 3 targets, 1 near a hostage. She put a round in the target's head. Precision shot, moving to the next. Third room, clear, kept moving. Fourth room, 2 targets in cover positions. She engaged while moving rounds, walking up the barricade until targets were neutralized. She lowered the rifle, cleared it, safed it. Briggs clicked the timer. 34 seconds. 0 hostage casualties. The candidates stared. 34 seconds, 11 seconds faster than their best time, and every shot had been placed with surgical precision. Briggs spoke while Alexandra set the rifle on the ready table. She's certified expert marksman on every weapon system in SEAL inventory, including classified platforms you'll never see. This is her easy day performance. The candidates ran the course several more times. Alexandra provided coaching between runs, adjusting stances, correcting muzzle discipline, teaching them to trust their training and make decisions faster, because in real combat, hesitation got you killed more reliably than enemy fire. By the end, times were improving. The candidates were learning not just techniques but mindset, the operational tempo required for Tier 1 work, the difference between good and exceptional. The pool complex was brutal, 25 meters long, 12 feet deep at the far end. Specifically designed for drown-proofing training, that sadistic evolution that separated SEAL candidates from everyone else. Because SEALs had to be comfortable in the water, even when comfort was impossible. Alexandra stood at the pool's edge, back in dry PT gear. Combat stress drown-proofing, hands bound behind your back, feet bound together. Retrieve the dive brick from 12 feet. Surface. You have 1 attempt. Panic is automatic failure. She held up the zip ties that would bind their hands and feet. Industrial strength, not coming off once applied. Garrett volunteered first. Hands secured behind his back, feet zip-tied together. He shuffled to the edge, jumped in. Immediate struggling, the body's panic response when it realized mobility was gone and water was everywhere. He fought it, managed to sink using body weight, grabbed the brick in his teeth, started the ascent, made it, surfaced, gasping but successful. 5 more candidates went. 2 panicked, had to be pulled out by safety divers. Automatic failures. 3 succeeded, barely. Alexandra's turn. She sat at the pool edge, extended her hands behind her back. Briggs secured them, then her feet. Tight, professional. She rolled into the water without fanfare. Sank immediately, no struggling, No thrashing, just controlled descent dolphin kick motion, using her entire body since her limbs were useless. She reached the bottom, 12 feet down, took the brick in her teeth, started ascending. Efficient kicks. Minimal movement. Oxygen conservation. Surface 30 seconds later. Not gasping. Breathing elevated but controlled. The brick still in her teeth until hands pulled her to the side and cut the zip ties. She did that after being submerged for 3 minutes during a training evolution where they were testing psychological limits, Briggs said. Most people black out at 2 minutes. She stayed conscious and completed the task at 3. That's not physical, that's mental. That's refusing to let your brain tell you you're dying even when every cell is screaming for air. The afternoon evolved into a blur of additional challenges. Land navigation across 10 kilometers of varied terrain, GPS denied, map and compass only. Alexandra set the course record. The candidates struggled but adapted, learning from her demonstration, understanding that navigation was about pace count and terrain association and keeping your head when you were lost and tired, and the easy answer was to quit. Tactical communications under stress, encrypted radio protocols while performing physical tasks while being shouted at, while information changed rapidly and decisions had to be made with incomplete data. This was where intel specialists like Wade shined, but even he struggled to match Alexandra's calm under pressure. Her ability to process multiple information streams and issue coherent commands while her body was being pushed past normal limits. By 1800 hours, the candidates were exhausted, not physically broken. They were SEALs. They'd survived BS, but mentally fatigued. The accumulated stress of constant evaluation, of being tested by someone who kept raising the standard just when they thought they'd reached it. Briggs called them to formation outside the training building. The sun was setting over Coronado. The Pacific looked gold and peaceful, completely indifferent to the suffering that happened on its shores. Final evolution, Briggs announced. Team tactical simulation. This is not an individual evaluation. You work as a team, you succeed or fail as a team. He gestured to a building behind them. Mock-up facility, designed to simulate real-world structures used in actual operations. Operation Ghost Wind, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. March 15, 2014. The scenario you're about to run is based on a real operation. Real decisions, real consequences. The candidates shifted. Something in Briggs's tone had changed, heavier, more serious. Alexandra stepped forward. Her face was different. The professional mask was still there, but cracks showed. This was personal. This mattered in a way the other evolutions hadn't. Ghost Wind was a direct action mission. Extraction of a wounded SEAL fire team pinned down by enemy forces. Intel indicated light enemy presence. 20 to 30 fighters. Intel was wrong. Over 40 enemy combatants. Heavy weapons. Coordinated defense. She paused. Breathed. I was ground force commander. 6 operators under my command. Our mission was to reach the wounded SEALs' established defensive perimeter and hold until air support could clear the landing zone for extraction helicopters. The candidates listened, completely focused, because this wasn't a training story. This was real. You could hear it in her voice. We infiltrated successfully, reached the wounded team, established perimeter. Then enemy forces attacked in strength. We were outnumbered 7 to 1. Sustained contact for 4 hours. I made the decision to hold position and call in air support rather than attempt movement with wounded personnel. Her voice stayed steady, professional, but her eyes were somewhere else. March 15, 2014. Helmand Province. Watching people die. We held. Air support arrived, cleared the landing zone. Helicopters extracted all wounded personnel. 12 SEALs saved. Mission success. She stopped. The candidates waited. Chief Petty Officer James Hartley, 32 years old, New Hampshire. 2 kids, killed by RPG fragmentation while holding the northern perimeter. Her voice didn't break, but something in it hurt. Chief Petty Officer Robert Novak, 29 years old, Wisconsin. Engaged, wedding planned for that summer. Killed by sniper fire while providing cover for the helicopter landing. Silence, complete and absolute. I made the tactically correct decision. By doctrine, by training, by every metric we use to evaluate operational success, holding position was right. We saved 12 lives, but I lost two brothers, two men who trusted me to bring them home. She looked at each candidate. Her eyes weren't wet, but they carried weight that made several of them look away. So when I tell you that planning isn't about glory, that command isn't about ego, that success isn't measured by how many enemies you kill, but by how many of your people survive, understand that I paid for that knowledge with blood I can never get back. Briggs spoke into the silence. You're going to run Ghostwind. Same scenario, same constraints. Commander Thorne will observe. She will not intervene. You plan, you execute, you succeed or fail based on your decisions. You have 15 minutes to plan. Designate a team leader. Begin. The candidates moved to the planning table, sat, looked at each other. The social calculus was different now. Leadership wasn't about ego anymore. It was about responsibility, about carrying the weight if people died. Wade Hollister looked around, nodded to Garrett. You lead, your infantry. This is your world. Garrett shook his head. No, you're intel. You think. We need thinking right now. The group settled. Wade became the de facto leader. They studied the scenario briefing. Wounded friendlies, enemy positions, limited air support initially, time pressure. We hold, Wade said. That's what she did? Establish perimeter, call air support. Wait. Finn Sullivan, the medic, looked at the map. Thought. What if we don't hold? What if we create a diversion? The table went quiet. Finn continued. Look at the terrain. Enemy forces here, here, and here, focused on the perimeter. What if we send a small element to conduct a diversionary assault on their flank, split their attention? Create a brief window where their fire is divided. Use that window for helicopter insertion. Wade studied the map, saw what Finn was suggesting. Risky, aggressive, outside doctrine, but creative. It would have to be perfectly timed. Diversion happens helicopters immediately in immediate extraction. Seconds matter. Garrett leaned in. We split into 3 elements. 2-man diversion team, 4-man security team for the wounded. Rest provide covering fire and coordinate air assets. They worked through it. Refined timing, designated roles. It was different from Alexandra's decision. Fundamentally different tactical approach. More aggressive, more risk, but potentially faster, potentially fewer casualties. 15 minutes elapsed. They briefed their plan to Alexandra and Briggs. Alexandra listened, faced neutral. When they finished, she asked 3 questions, all tactical, all relevant. They answered, showed they'd thought through contingencies. Execute, she said. They ran the simulation. It was chaos, simulated gunfire, smoke, shouting. The diversion team moved aggressively, drew enemy attention. The security team moved the wounded, covering fire from support elements. Helicopters came in during the window. It worked, not perfectly, but it worked. All wounded extracted, all friendly forces extracted. 0 KIA, 0 WIA. Simulation ended. Lights came up. The candidates stood there, breathing hard, adrenaline dumping, waiting for assessment. Alexandra walked into the simulation space, looked at the positions they'd held, the routes they'd used. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer, real. That approach, in 2014, I never considered it. I was focused on defensive doctrine, on holding position, on doing what I'd been trained to do. She turned to face them. Your solution was creative, aggressive, unconventional, and it would have worked. Her voice cracked slightly, just slightly. It might have saved them. The candidates understood. She wasn't just evaluating them, she was learning from them, growing, using their fresh perspective to see options she'd missed when it mattered most. Briggs stepped forward. This is why she's here, not just to teach, to learn from the next generation, to evolve. Because warfare evolves and warriors who don't evolve die or get people killed. He looked at all of them. Gentlemen, you've passed, all of you, tomorrow's 0600 graduation ceremony, full dress uniforms, and Commander Thorne will explain exactly what you've been selected for. The candidates filed out, exhausted, changed. Different people than they'd been 18 hours ago. Alexandra remained in the simulation space, alone, staring at the mock terrain that represented Helmand Province. March 15, 2014. The day she'd made the right decision and lost two men anyway. Briggs approached quietly, stood next to her. "They found a better way," he said softly. "I know," she replied, "and that's exactly why we need them." She turned, walked out, carrying weights that never got lighter, only more familiar. The night settled over Coronado. Tomorrow would bring answers. But tonight was for reflection, for understanding that even the best operators carried ghosts, and sometimes the ghosts taught lessons the living couldn't. The morning came sharp and clear, the way California mornings did when the marine layer burned off early and left nothing but blue sky and harder truths. 0600, the candidates assembled outside the Naval Special Warfare Center administrative building, the one with the flags and the memorial plaques and the photographs of men who'd gone into dark places and never come back. They wore service dress white uniforms, summer whites, the formal uniform that SEALs rarely wore because SEALs rarely did formal. Operational units lived in combat gear or PT gear or civilian clothes when the mission required blending. But today required tradition, required ceremony, required acknowledging that some moments mattered enough to put on the uniform that represented everything the Navy stood for. 24 men in perfect formation, ribbons on their chests telling individual stories of deployments and actions and moments where they'd been tested. Not as many ribbons as they'd earn eventually, not as many as the officers who'd be speaking, but enough to show they'd been places, done things, survived. Families sat in folding chairs arranged in rows. Parents, siblings, a few wives and girlfriends. People who loved these men but couldn't fully understand what they did, where they went, what it cost. The families smiled and took photos and were proud. And that was enough. That had to be enough. Because the full truth of what these men would do in the years ahead would remain classified long after everyone in those chairs was dead. Master Chief Thomas Briggs stood at the podium. He wore service dress blues, the enlisted equivalent of the officers' whites, dark blue jacket with gold buttons, ribbons covering the left side of his chest in neat rows. 42 years of ribbons, campaigns and conflicts and actions that spanned from the Cold War's final days through the forever wars of the 21st century. His face was weathered in the way that 64 years of military service weathered a person. Not soft, not broken, just marked. Carved by time and violence and losses that accumulated until they became part of your skeletal structure, until you carried them in the marrow. He began speaking. No microphone needed. Command voice developed over 4 decades, projected, naturally reached the back rows, demanded attention, not through volume but through authority. 42 years ago, I joined the teams as a young operator who thought courage meant fearlessness. His voice carried across the assembled crowd. Families leaned forward. Candidates stood motionless at attention. I was wrong. I've served in 4 major conflicts, trained thousands of SEALs, lost friends I can never replace, watched good men die for reasons that made sense in the moment and haunt me in the years after. And through all of that, I learned that real courage isn't the absence of fear. Real courage is acting despite fear, leading despite doubt, sacrificing despite the cost. He paused. Let the words settle. Let people absorb the weight of what 42 years meant. 42 years of service. 42 years of watching young men walk into danger. 42 years of writing letters to parents explaining that their sons had died, serving something larger than themselves. 42 years of carrying ghosts. I've trained over 3,000 SEALs, watched them earn the trident, watched them deploy, watched some of them come home changed, watched others not come home at all. And every single one of them taught me something about resilience, about sacrifice, about the infinite capacity of the human spirit to endure when endurance seems impossible. His eyes moved across the candidates, then to Alexandra standing off to the side in her service dress blues, her ribbon rack smaller than his, but no less significant. Quality over quantity. Every ribbon earned in direct combat. Every ribbon representing moments where death had been one decision away and she'd chosen correctly. 10 years ago, many people said a woman couldn't serve in SEAL direct action roles, that women didn't have the physical capability, the mental toughness, the killer instinct required for Tier 1 operations. Commander Thorne didn't argue with those people, didn't debate, didn't write editorials or file complaints. She just did the work, completed the training, passed the selections, deployed, executed missions, brought her people home, and she did it so well that she stands here today as one of the most decorated combat operators in SEAL history. He turned to face Alexandra directly, rendered a salute. She returned it. The kind of mutual respect that transcended rank, transcended gender, transcended everything except the shared experience of being downrange when things went wrong and having to make it right through skill and will and refusing to quit. Not because of her gender, Briggs continued lowering his salute, but because of her skill, her judgment, her willingness to pay the price that leadership demands. The price measured in sleepless nights, in hard decisions, and carrying the names of the ones who didn't make it home. He turned back to the audience. His voice shifted, softer but no less intense. These 24 candidates have completed evaluation protocols designed to test not just their physical capabilities, but their mental adaptability, their emotional resilience, their ability to learn and grow, and check their egos long enough to understand that no one, no matter how skilled, knows everything. They've proven they can be taught. And in the world they're about to enter, that's the most valuable quality an operator can possess. He stepped back from the podium, gestured to Alexandra. Commander Thorne. She stepped forward, took the podium, looked out at the assembled candidates and families. Her face was composed, professional, but something moved behind her eyes. Memory, weight. The accumulated cost of 15 years doing things that would never make the news, saving lives that would never know her name, carrying losses that would never leave her dreams. She spoke quietly, the way she always spoke, but the formation was silent and her voice carried perfectly. 10 years ago, I was the first woman to serve in SEAL Tier 1 operations. Many said I couldn't, that I was a political statement, a diversity checkbox, that I'd get people killed because the military was lowering standards to meet quotas. She paused, let that hang in the air. Let people remember the debates, the arguments, the vitriol that had surrounded women in combat roles. I had something to prove, to them, to the teams, to myself, to every woman who might come after me. So I worked harder, trained longer, deployed more, took every mission offered, pushed myself past every limit because I couldn't afford to be average. Average meant proving them right. So I became exceptional, not because I wanted to, because I had to. Her hands gripped the podium edges, white knuckles, control. Today, I have nothing left to prove. My record speaks. Navy Cross, Silver Stars, combat deployments across multiple theaters, 7-level black missions completed with 0 team losses. The Silver Trident Distinguished Combat Pin that only 4 other living operators possess. My scars speak. Purple Heart with oak leaf clusters, injuries sustained in combat, pain that becomes part of your daily baseline. And the men I've lost speak loudest of all. Her voice cracked, barely, just for a moment, then steadied. Chief Petty Officer James Hartley, Chief Petty Officer Robert Novak, Operation Ghost Wind, March 15, 2014. I made the right tactical decision and they died anyway. Because sometimes right decisions still cost lives. And you carry that. You carry them. Every day, every mission, every time you make another decision that might put someone in the ground. The families in the audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the sanitized military speech they were used to. This was raw, real, the truth that usually stayed behind closed doors. This week, every man who mocked my worn uniform learned something. Not that women can be SEALs. That's proven. Multiple times over. But that strength doesn't announce itself. That heroes don't need recognition. That the mission, the team, the purpose matter more than ego, more than pride, more than needing everyone to know how tough you are. She looked directly at the candidates. My purpose now is ensuring the next generation of SEALs surpasses mine. That you learn from my mistakes so you don't repeat them. That you find better solutions to old problems. That when you face your ghost win moment, you have more tools, more options, more wisdom than I did when I made decisions that got good men killed. She stepped back from the podium. Because you just taught me something I needed to learn. You found a better approach to a problem I thought I'd solved. And that's exactly how it should work. The old generation teaches the new, and the new generation surpasses the old. And everyone benefits, everyone grows, and maybe fewer people die. She rendered a salute to the formation. Congratulations on completing evaluation. You've earned what comes next. The ceremony continued with formal recognition, official graduation from the advanced training program assignments being read. Parents took photos. Families congratulated their sons and brothers and husbands. Normal military ceremony things, but beneath the surface, the 24 candidates understood. This wasn't about the ceremony, wasn't about the photos or the applause. This was about something else, something coming, something that required a separate briefing away from families and cameras and people who didn't have the clearances to know what actually happened in the shadows. After the ceremony concluded, after families dispersed, after photos were taken and hands were shaken, Briggs gathered the 24 candidates. 0900, Building 7, secure briefing room, bring nothing, tell no one. They dispersed, changed into utilities, met at the designated building at the designated time. Building 7 was nondescript. Concrete block construction. No windows. Heavy security doors with cipher locks and card readers. The kind of building where classified conversations happened and stayed classified. The briefing room inside was small, designed for perhaps 30 people maximum. No windows, soundproofed walls, a large screen at the front, a podium, chairs arranged in rows. The candidates filed in, sat, waited. Briggs entered. Alexandra followed. Behind them came someone else. Captain rank. Naval Special Warfare insignia. Face that had seen things and filed them away in compartments marked, never discuss. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't need to. His presence said everything necessary about the seriousness of what came next. Briggs stood at the front. The unnamed captain took position near the door. Alexandra stood to the side. Observer now, not briefer. What I'm about to tell you is classified special access program. SAP level clearance. You will not discuss this outside this room. You will not mention it to family, friends, teammates not present. Violation of SAP protocols is a federal crime punishable by decades in military prison. Understood. 24 voices in unison. Yes, Master Chief. Briggs nodded, pulled up a slide date on the screen. Title text only. Project Deepwater Special Access Program, established 1985. Project Deepwater was created during the Cold War. 1985. Soviet Union still existed. Berlin Wall still stood. The threat environment was different but no less dangerous. The program was designed for deep cover counterterrorism operations. Deniable actions. Missions that couldn't be officially acknowledged. Operators who didn't exist on paper. Another slide. Organizational chart. Heavily redacted. Most names blocked out. But the structure was clear. Small units, 4 to 6 operators, direct support from JSOC oversight, Presidential Finding Authority. Deepwater teams conduct operations that other units can't. Can't because of political constraints, can't because of international law, can't because success requires deniability, and most military actions leave evidence. Deepwater operators work in the gray areas. They eliminate threats before those threats become headlines. They prevent attacks that never happen because the attackers never survive long enough to execute. They save lives by taking lives in ways that never make the news. He let that sink in, watched the candidates process. Some faces showed excitement, others showed concern. Smart ones showed both. Because what Briggs was describing sounded like assassination, like extrajudicial killing. Like the kind of moral gray area that kept people awake at night, wondering if they were the good guys or just better killers. No credit, no medals for most missions, no public recognition. Your families won't know what you do. Your friends from other teams won't know where you go. You'll disappear for weeks or months. Come back and can't talk about where you were or what you did. Some of you will die, and the circumstances of your death will be classified. Your families will be told you died in a training accident. They'll never know the truth. Briggs's voice was flat, matter of fact. not selling it, not glamorizing it, just stating reality. High risk, high operational tempo, psychological toll that exceeds normal SEAL deployments because you're not just fighting enemies, you're fighting the moral complexity of actions that exist outside normal rules of engagement. You'll make decisions that haunt you. Kill people who might not be enemy combatants in the traditional sense, but whose continued existence represents a threat to American lives. And you'll never get to explain, never get to justify, you just carry it. Another slide. This one showed mission summaries, heavily redacted, dates, locations, nothing else visible except mission successful in green text. Commander Thorne has led a deep water task unit for 3 years, 21 missions across 3 theaters. All successful, 0 team losses, 0 compromised operations, 0 leaks. She's here because she's forming a new task unit, additional capacity. The threat environment is expanding. We need more operators who can work in the shadows. He stepped aside, gestured to Alexandra. She walked to the front, looked at the 24 faces, young, eager, talented, about to make a decision that would define the rest of their lives. This is voluntary. Walking away right now carries no penalty, no judgment. You return to regular team assignments. You have successful careers. You deploy. You serve honorably. No one here will think less of you for choosing that path. She paused. Let that option exist. Let them know the door was open. But if you stay, understand what you're accepting. You're accepting moral complexity. You're accepting isolation. You're accepting that history won't record your actions, that your grandchildren won't read about what you did, that you'll die and be buried, and people will think you were just another soldier, not knowing that you were one of the few who stood between civilization and chaos. Her voice dropped lower. You're also accepting brotherhood deeper than most people will ever experience, because the men in your task unit will be the only ones who understand, the only ones who know, the only ones who can look you in the eye and see the weight you carry and carry it with you. That bond, that shared burden becomes your anchor, becomes the reason you keep going even when the missions blur together and the body count climbs and you start wondering if any of it matters. She looked at Briggs, then back at the candidates. It matters. Every target eliminated, every attack prevented, every American life saved because we operated in the dark so they could live in the light. It matters, but you have to believe that. Because no one else will tell you, no one else can tell you. It's classified. Silence filled the room, heavy, oppressive. The kind of silence where decisions formed and futures changed. Finn Sullivan raised his hand. Alexandra nodded. Ma'am, why us specifically? Why this group? She smiled slightly. First genuine smile in the briefing. Because you proved you can learn. Most operators can execute, can follow orders, can complete missions. But deep water requires more, requires adaptation, creativity, willingness to question doctrine when doctrine doesn't fit the situation. Yesterday you found a better solution to Ghost Wind. You didn't just replicate what I'd done, you improved it. That's rare. That's valuable. That's what I need. Wade Hollister spoke without raising his hand. When do we start? Alexandra looked at him, saw the decision already made, saw the hunger, the need to be part of something that mattered even if no one knew it mattered. Training starts Monday, 4 months, then you deploy. Questions? Garrett Blackwood stood, came to attention. Ma'am, speaking for everyone here, we're in. He looked around, the other candidates nodded, all of them, every single one, because this was why they'd become SEALs. Not for the recognition, not for the glory, for the mission, for serving something larger, for standing in dark places so others didn't have to. Alexandra nodded once. Monday, 0600, same building. Bring nothing but commitment. You're dismissed. They filed out, excited, nervous, changed. Understanding that they just crossed a threshold most warriors never approached. Understanding that the next 4 months would transform them. And understanding that transformation had a price paid in pieces of yourself you couldn't get back. Garrett lingered, waited until the room cleared, approached Alexandra. Ma'am, I need to apologize for what I said, for judging you based on ignorance and insecurity. You're the finest operator I've ever witnessed. And I was too stupid to see it until you proved it. I'm sorry. Alexandra looked at him, saw genuine contrition, saw growth, saw a young warrior who'd learned humility the hard way. Your initial mistake wasn't judgment, Lieutenant. It was certainty. You were certain you knew what a warrior looked like, certain you understood capability based on appearance. Certainty closes minds. Doubt creates questions. Questions lead to growth. She extended her hand. He shook it. You grew this week. That's all I needed to see. That's why you're being offered this opportunity. Don't waste it. I won't, ma'am. He left. Alexandra remained. Briggs approached. The unnamed captain had already disappeared. Back to whatever office he occupied in whatever building handled the administrative side of deniable operations. They're good, Briggs said quietly. They will be, Alexandra corrected, after training, after their first mission, after they understand what this actually costs. Mom, you'll get them there. With your help. 4 more months. Then you retire. Then I'm doing this without you. Briggs smiled, tired, genuine. You've been doing it without me for years. I'm just the paperwork guy now. You're the operator. They walked out together, into California sunshine that felt wrong somehow. Too bright, too cheerful, too disconnected from the conversation that had just happened about operations conducted in darkness. 2 weeks later, another ceremony. Smaller, private, no families, no formal speeches. Just the deep water candidates, a few senior officers, and one master chief reaching mandatory retirement. Thomas Briggs stood in the team room, the sacred space where SEALs gathered before missions and after missions and during the in-between times when you needed to be around people who understood. Plaques on the walls, unit citations, photos of men who'd served and men who'd died. History saturated into the concrete and wood. He wore utilities, working uniform, because retirement ceremonies for operators didn't require dress uniforms. Required being real, being honest, being surrounded by warriors who knew what the job cost because they'd paid it themselves. Alexander stood next to him. The 24 deep water candidates arranged in formation. Briggs looked at them, took in their faces, memorized them the way he'd memorized thousands of faces over 42 years. Knowing that some of these faces would eventually join the photos on the wall, knowing that was the price, accepting it anyway. 42 years, he said quietly, not projecting, just talking. I've served in 4 wars across 4 decades, trained over 3,000 SEALs, lost too many good men, watched this community evolve from small, unit, direct action to the most capable special operations force in history. He paused, voice thick with emotion he normally kept buried. I've seen things that will stay with me until I die, done things I can never discuss, made decisions that saved lives and decisions that cost lives. And through all of it, I've been surrounded by warriors who understood that the job mattered more than the individual. That sacrifice wasn't just a word. That honor meant something real and tangible and worth dying for. He looked at Alexandra, held her gaze. Commander Thorne represents something I've rarely seen in 42 years. A warrior who understands both the necessity of violence and its true cost. Not because of textbooks, not because of theory, because she's lived it, bled it, carried the weight of command through actual hell, and come out the other side still committed to the mission, still willing to lead, still willing to sacrifice. He turned to a case sitting on the table. Wooden, polished, brass hinges and latches. He opened it. Inside lay an M1 Garand rifle, World War II era, the weapon that had armed American infantry from Normandy to the Pacific. Worn but pristine, oiled and maintained with the kind of care that spoke of love, of respect, of understanding that this was more than metal and wood. This was legacy. My grandfather, Staff Sergeant William Briggs, carried this rifle at Normandy Beach. June 6, 1944, D-Day. His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat, continued. He was 23 years old, Army infantry, first wave. He survived the beach, fought across France, liberated concentration camps, saw things that broke him in ways that never healed. He came home, had nightmares for 40 years, drank too much, struggled, but he survived, and he understood something important. Briggs lifted the rifle from the case, held it with reverence. He understood that this rifle, this tool of violence, represented something larger than killing. It represented standing between evil and the innocent, between tyranny and freedom, between darkness and light. He passed it to me when I joined the teams in 1979, told me that legacy wasn't about possession. Legacy was about passing forward the values this weapon represented: duty, sacrifice, willingness to stand in dark places. He turned to Alexandra, extended the rifle. I was going to take this home, mount it above my fireplace, let it become a decoration, a conversation piece. But that's not honoring my grandfather. That's not honoring the values he fought for. He offered it to her. She hesitated, started to shake her head. Master Chief, I can't accept. You can, you must. His voice was firm but gentle. Because I need to know that everything I fought for, everyone I lost, everyone who came before me continues through warriors like you. You've earned this. Not through missions or medals, through understanding what it costs and being willing to pay it anyway. Through leading when leadership means carrying impossible weight. Through surviving when survival means living with ghosts. Alexandra's eyes were wet. First time the candidates had seen tears, real tears, she reached out, took the rifle, held it like it was made of glass, like it was sacred. Because it was. And someday, Briggs continued, you'll pass it to someone worthy, someone who understands, someone who carries the torch forward. That's how we honor those who came before. That's how we ensure they didn't die for nothing. That's how legacy works. They embraced, not formal military embrace, real embrace, father figure and daughter figure, mentor and student. Two warriors who'd seen too much and survived anyway and understood that the only way to make sense of it was to keep serving, keep teaching, keep passing forward to the knowledge earned through blood. The candidates watched, silent, understanding that they were witnessing something profound, something that transcended rank and time, something that connected 1944 to the present day, something that would connect the present to whatever future wars their children would fight. When they separated, Alexandra was crying openly. Briggs's eyes were wet too. Neither of them cared, because this moment earned tears, demanded them, required acknowledging the weight of what was being passed forward. Thank you, she whispered. I'll honor it. I'll honor him. I'll honor you. I know, Briggs replied. That's why it's yours. The informal ceremony ended. Briggs shook hands, received salutes, walked out of the team room for the last time as an active duty SEAL. 42 years, done, retired, moving into whatever came next for warriors who survived the wars but carried them forever. Alexandra remained, holding the M1 Garand. The candidates approached one by one. Garrett, Finn, Wade, each of them understanding that they just witnessed the passing of more than a rifle. They'd witnessed the passing of responsibility, of legacy, of the eternal burden that warriors carry generation after generation. The months blurred. Training, mission preparation, the kind of intensive instruction that transformed operators into something sharper, harder, more capable. The 24 candidates became deepwater operators, learned skills that weren't taught in regular SEAL training, learned to operate in the moral gray areas where right and wrong blurred, and mission success was the only clear metric. 6 months after the evaluation that had started everything, Alexandra stood in front of a new training class. Different faces, same energy, same confidence, bordering on arrogance, same belief that they understood what it meant to be a SEAL. She wore her working uniform, faded, worn, the same one she'd worn when she'd walked into that first briefing and been dismissed as irrelevant. She stood at the back of the room, observing, waiting. The candidates noticed her. The reaction was predictable: confusion, amusement, the dismissive energy of young warriors who thought they'd figured out the world. One recruit, louder than the others, stage whispered to his buddy, "Who's the woman in the old uniform? She lost." Before anyone else could respond, the door opened. Garrett Blackwood walked in. He wore instructor credentials now, assistant instructor, on track for senior instructor status within a year. His face had changed, harder, more serious. The swagger was gone, replaced by something earned through missions he couldn't discuss and experiences that had aged him beyond his years. He heard the comment, walked directly to the recruit who'd made it, stood close, spoke quietly but with absolute authority. That's Commander Alexandra Thorne, callsign Reaper. Most decorated active duty SEAL, Navy Cross, multiple silver stars, holder of the Silver Trident Distinguished Combat Pin. She's about to teach you how to survive what kills most people. I strongly suggest you listen instead of talk, because 6 months ago I was you. Made the same stupid comment, and I've spent every day since learning just how wrong I was. The recruit's face went white. Garrett stepped back, nodded to Alexandra. She walked to the front of the room. Same routine, same evaluation, different candidates. But the lesson was eternal. Don't judge, don't assume, don't let ego blind you to excellence that doesn't match your preconceptions. Gentlemen, she said quietly, let's begin. Obstacle course, baseline standards. Anyone want to demonstrate first? The cycle continued, would always continue, as long as there were warriors to train and missions to execute and threats to eliminate. In another building, another briefing room, the Deepwater Task Unit prepared for deployment. Garrett Finn Wade and 21 others, plus 3 new additions. 2 women, 1 veteran DevGru operator transferring in. The team had grown, evolved, become something that represented the future of special operations. Finn checked equipment. Wade reviewed intelligence briefings. Garrett coordinated with air assets. The team moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted movement, no unnecessary communication. Professionals executing a routine they had done dozens of times. Alexandra entered. They came to attention. She waved them down. Deployment location, classified until wheels up, ma'am, Finn replied. But we're ready. I know you are. Remember your training. Trust your team. Bring everyone home. Garrett smiled, confident, earned confidence. We'll bring everyone home, ma'am. That's the mission, every single time. She nodded, left them to their preparations, walked out into California sunshine that was just beginning to soften as afternoon approached evening. The next morning before dawn, Alexandra ran. Not training, not PT. Just running because running was meditation, and she needed to clear her head before another deployment, another mission, another series of decisions where wrong choices meant body bags. She ran along the beach, salt air and crashing waves and sand that shifted under each stride. Ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached and the noise in her head quieted to something manageable. Then she stopped, walked to the Naval Special Warfare Memorial, the wall where names were engraved. Names of SEALs who'd died in service, who'd gone down range and never came home, who'd paid the ultimate price for serving something larger than themselves. She found the name she was looking for. CPO James R. Hartley. Operation Ghostwind, March 15, 2014. CPO Robert D. Novak. Operation Ghostwind, March 15, 2014. She knelt, placed a small silver trident pin replica at the base of the memorial. Personal ritual, done every time before deployment. Acknowledgement that she carried them, would always carry them. Still keeping them safe, brothers, she whispered. Still bringing them home. Wade found a better answer, the one I missed. You didn't die for nothing. Your sacrifice taught lessons that save lives now. That will save lives tomorrow. That matters. Has to matter. She stood, rendered a salute, held it. The sun was rising behind her, golden light painting the memorial, painting the ocean, painting everything with that brief perfect moment when night became day and the world seemed clean and new and untouched by the violence humans inflicted on each other. Behind her, propped against the memorial base where she'd placed it, was the M1 Garand, Briggs's grandfather's rifle, legacy weapon from Normandy to the present. She'd brought it, wanted them to see it, wanted them to know that she remembered, that she understood, that their sacrifice connected to something larger. To Normandy and Iwo Jima and every battlefield where Americans had stood between darkness and light. The sun cleared the horizon, morning arrived, another day, another mission, another chance to prove that the dead hadn't died in vain. Alexandra picked up the rifle, turned, walked back toward the base, toward another deployment, toward whatever came next. Behind her, the memorial remained, silent, eternal, holding names, holding memories, holding the weight of service that continued generation after generation because some things were worth dying for, and someone had to be willing to stand in dark places. The ocean crashed against the shore, indifferent, eternal. The sun climbed higher, and somewhere in a classified location, warriors prepared for missions that would never be acknowledged, that would never make the news, that would save lives, that would never know they'd been saved. And that was enough, had to be enough, because it was classified. The screen faded slowly to black. Text appeared. White letters on darkness. The Silver Trident Distinguished Combat Pin has been awarded to only 5 SEAL operators in history. Their identities remain classified. Their missions will never be fully known, but their legacy lives on in every operator they trained and in every life they saved. The text held, then faded, leaving only darkness and silence, and the understanding that some warriors served in shadows, and that was exactly where they belonged, where they were needed, where they could do the most good, where they could stand between civilization and chaos and ensure the light continued burning even when the cost was measured in pieces of themselves they could never recover.